The grand ballroom of the St. Regis glittered, a galaxy of crystal chandeliers reflecting off polished marble. At its center, Jiao Ye preened, her diamond engagement ring catching the light as she clung to the arm of Bo, CEO of the formidable Sterling Corporation. 5 years, she cooed to a circle of fawning socialites, her voice a saccharine melody of triumph. I told you all he was worth the wait. Soon, you'll be addressing me as Mrs. Poe. Her victory lap was cut short by a sudden commotion at the entrance. To security guards, burly men twice the size of their assailants, suddenly crumpled to the floor, their bodies spasming. Through the parted doors marched a pair of 5-year-olds aboard with a stoic expression, and a girl with a determined glint in her eyes. Xiao Mu and Zinua moved with the fluid grace of seasoned martial artists, their tiny hands disabling another guard with a precise jab to a pressure point in his neck. The opulent hall fell into a stunned silence. Bo's grandfather, Chairman He, who had been observing the proceedings with a weary eye, shot up from his seat, his gaze fixed on the children, his breath catching in his throat. To Bo's sharp jawline, the girl's defiant posture, it was like looking at a photograph of Bo from 30 years ago. A forgotten hope, long buried, clawed its way to the surface. Bo's face was a mask of cold fury. This was his engagement, a carefully orchestrated corporate and social event, now hijacked by two miniature anarchists. Get them out of here, he growled. But his grandfather stepped forward, his voice trembling with an emotion Bo hadn't heard in years. Wait, the old man commanded, his eyes still locked on the children. He turned to Bo, a wild, desperate light in his eyes. Don't you see it? The resemblance is undeniable. We must do a DNA test. Now. The words hung in the air, a shockwave that rippled through the crowd. A DNA test. Bo felt a jolt, a dislodged memory of a hazy, rose-scented night 6 years ago. A woman he couldn't quite remember, a mistake he tried to forget. Could it be? The children stood their ground. Xiao Mu, his small arms crossed, glared at Bo. We're not going anywhere, he declared, his voice ringing with startling authority. Our mummy said you're a bad man who is marrying a mean lady. Zinua nodded vigorously. That's right, you are dad, and you can't marry her. Chairman He let out a choked, triumphant laugh. My great-grandchildren. I found my great-grandchildren. He spun to his assistant, his voice booming. Cancel the engagement and find their mother. I want a city-wide search. Spare no expense. Hours later, in a minimalist apartment overlooking the city, Chaoji knelt before her children. Her face was a storm of conflicting emotions: anger, fear, and a fierce, overwhelming love. Do you have any idea what you've done? She asked, her voice stern. You crashed a private event. You assaulted people. This is not a game. Xiao Mu and Zinuo lowered their heads, their bravado gone. We're sorry, Mommy, Zinuo whispered, her eyes welling with tears. We heard Grandma on the phone, saying that mean lady was going to marry Daddy. She's the one who made you cry a long, long time ago. We just wanted to stand up for you. A sharp, violent buzzing from the intercom interrupted them. Before Chaoji could answer, the door to her apartment burst open. Jiaoye stormed in, her face contorted with rage, flanked by two menacing guards. You bitch, she shrieked, her voice stripped of its earlier sweetness. You couldn't stand to see me happy, could you? You had to send your little beggar's children to ruin my life. Her eyes, filled with venom, darted to Xiaomu and Zinuo. I'll kill you and your disgusting brats. In that instant, something inside Chaoji snapped. The maternal whirring vanished, replaced by glacial fury. The timid, heartbroken girl Jiaoye had destroyed 6 years ago was gone forever. You will not touch my children, Chaoji said, her voice dangerously low. She rose to her feet, a predator uncoiling. As Jiaoye's guards lunged, Chaoji moved with blinding speed. A swift block, a twist of a wrist, a precise strike to the elbow joint. Both men were on the floor, groaning in pain. Before Jiaoye could even register what had happened, she stared, stunned and enraged, as her sister stood over them, radiating an aura of untouchable power. "The Chaoji you knew is dead," Chaoji declared, her eyes like chips of ice. "From this day forward, everything you hold dear, your fiancé, your status, your reputation, I will take it all away, piece by piece." The next day, the assistants outside post office scrambled as a woman in a razor-sharp power suit bypassed them without a word. Chaoji strode into the sleek, high-rise office and placed a sleek portfolio on Bo's expansive desk. "Mr. Bo," she said, her voice crisp and professional. "I am Chaoji, the CEO of Hue Group." Bo looked up, momentarily taken aback by her audacity. He had been reviewing the chaotic reports from the previous night, his mind still reeling from the image of the two small children who looked so uncannily like him. "Hue Group," he said. His interest piqued. "Your new AI-driven logistics system is making waves. What do you want?" "A collaboration," she stated, her posture exuding confidence. "We will grant Sterling Corporation exclusive access to our technology. It will increase your efficiency by 40%. She paused, letting the offer sink in exchange for one condition. "Which is?" Bo asked, leaning forward, intrigued by this formidable woman. "You will remain single for 1 year," she said, an expression unreadable. "No engagement, no marriage. To anyone." Bo stared at her, a slow, disbelieving smile playing on his lips. The audacity was breathtaking. Was this about the fiasco last night? Was she the mother? "Are you trying to use a business deal to secure a place as Mrs. Bo? I admire the ambition, but I'm not interested." Chaoji's laugh was cold and sharp. "You misunderstand, Mr. Bo. My only interest is in settling a score with Jiaoye. I have absolutely no romantic interest in arrogant, self-important men like you." As she spoke, a faint, almost imperceptible scent wafted towards him rose, the same delicate fragrance from that night 6 years ago. The memory, previously a blur, sharpened with startling clarity. His eyes narrowed, scrutinizing her face. Her eyes, the proud set of her jaw. "It couldn't be your children," he said, his voice casual but his mind racing. "They're quite talented. Martial arts and traditional medicine at their age." Chaoji's cool demeanor didn't waver. "They are gifted, he repeated, the word echoing in his mind. He remembered bragging to his grandfather about his own childhood aptitudes in those very same disciplines. The pieces were clicking into place, forming a picture he wasn't sure he was ready to see. This woman, this powerful, enigmatic CEO, was not just a business rival. She was a ghost from his past, and she had just thrown his entire world into chaos. The scent of gasoline was a venomous promise, clinging to the air long before the first flicker of flame. Inside Chaoji's apartment, the world had shattered. Crystal vases lay in glittering heaps, sofa cushions were slashed open, and framed photos of smiling children were ground under a stiletto heel. Jiaoye, her face a mask of triumphant fury, watched as her hired thugs doused the expensive rugs. "Do you hear me?" She spat at the two small figures huddled by the window. Shamu stood protectively in front of his younger sister, his small body trembling. "Your mother tells you stories about your father, doesn't she? A king, a hero." Jiaoye laughed, a sound like scraping metal. "Your father is a bridge-dwelling beggar, a piece of trash she scraped off the street. That's all you are. The children of filth." Shamu clamped his hands over Zinuo's ears, but it was too late. The words had already found their mark, as a thug tossed a lighter onto the accelerant-soaked floor. A wall of fire erupted with a deafening whoosh. The henchman retreated, and not before one kicked over Xinuo's medical bag, sending her precious asthma inhaler skittering into the heart of the growing inferno. Smoke, thick and acrid, filled the room instantly. Xinuo's small chest began to heave. A desperate, rasping sound escaped her lips, the horrifying whistle of an airway closing. Cheech, she wheezed, eyes wide with terror as she called at her throat. I can't breathe. Just as Xiaomu's hope began to dissolve into the suffocating haze, the front door splintered inward. Xiaoji burst through the frame, a primal scream tearing from her throat. She moved like a storm, her eyes locked on her children, ignoring the searing heat and the men who tried to block her path. She fought with the ferocity of a cornered lioness, her strikes precise and disabling. Behind her, another figure emerged from the chaos of the hallway bow, drawn by the sirens and the column of black smoke. His face was a grim, unreadable slate. He saw Xiaoji fighting through the flames, and then he saw the children. As a burning ceiling beam groaned, ready to collapse, he moved without thinking, tackling Xiaoji and the kids, rolling them away just as the structure crashed down where they had stood. In the smoky chaos, Xiaomu's terrified cry pierced the roar of the fire. Dad, Xinuo, barely conscious, echoed the word in a faint, desperate whisper. The sound struck Bo like a physical blow, a key turning a lock deep within his soul. He scooped up Xinuo's limp form while Xiaoji gathered a coughing Xiaomu, and together they plunged back through the doorway to safety. The hospital corridor was a sterile, silent purgatory. Xiaoji paced relentlessly, her elegant clothes singed and soot-stained, her hands blistered and raw. The image of Xinuo's blue-tinged lips was burned into her mind. This is my fault. I left them. I failed them. The self-recrimination was a poison in her veins. She had been so focused on her revenge, so sure of her control, that she had forgotten how cornered animals behave. She had underestimated the depths of Jiao Ye's depravity. Suddenly, a phalanx of white coats, led by the hospital's chief of staff, swept into the emergency wing. They bypassed the standard triage, heading directly for the rooms where her children lay. A quiet word was spoken. Top-of-the-line equipment was rolled in, and the tone of the entire floor shifted from hurried to intensely focused. Xiaoji watched, bewildered, until she saw Bo standing out of the hall, his phone still pressed to his ear. He had made this happen. With a single call, he had mobilized the best medical care in the city. He ended the call and walked toward her, his expression hard. Tell me the truth, he said, his voice low and devoid of pleasantries. 6 years ago, the night they were conceived, was it a stranger? The question was a direct hit, stripping away all pretense. The lie she had carefully constructed to protect herself, to shield her children from the ugliness of their origin, was now her only defense against this man. A man whose face was a haunting echo of her son's. Their father was a homeless man, she bit out, her voice raw with a pain he couldn't possibly understand. A beggar I met under a bridge. Does that satisfy your curiosity? Her denial was vehement, but it did nothing to extinguish the fire in his eyes. His gaze drifted to the pediatric ICU, where his grandfather was already sitting by the children's bedsides, a look of profound certainty on his face. Bo's paternal instinct, a dormant, phantom limb for 6 long years, was screaming to life. He wasn't just a CEO here. He was something more. A nurse exited Xiaomu's room, a sympathetic look on her face. He's stable, but he's having nightmares. He keeps murmuring for his dad. He said he saw him in the fire. Xiaoji's composure finally cracked, a single tear tracing a clean path through the soot on her cheek. Po's conviction solidified into something as hard and undeniable as bedrock. They were his. The grand ballroom of the Jiao Group headquarters glittered under the weight of 1,000 crystals. Cameras flashed, champagne flowed, and Jiao Ye stood at the podium, a vision in couture, radiating smug victory. She had left Chaoji's life in ashes. Now, she was about to sign the deal that would cement her corporate legacy, a multi-billion-dollar partnership with the esteemed Hugh Group. This contract represents a new era for the Jiao Group, she announced, her voice dripping with false humility as she picked up the ceremonial pen. I wouldn't be so sure about that, the voice, amplified by the ballroom's acoustics, was as cold and sharp as ice. Every head turned there. Standing in the grand entryway was Chaoji. Her hair was still damp, her face pale beneath a thin layer of makeup, but her eyes burned with an unholy fire. She walked forward, not with the stride of a victim, but with the measured, predatory grace of a queen reclaiming her throne. Who let you in here? Jiao Ye hissed, her smile faltering. Chaoji ignored her, addressing the dumbfounded representative from Hugh Group. There seems to be a misunderstanding, she said, her voice ringing with authority. Jiao Ye is not your partner. I am. She gestured to the projector screen behind the podium, which flickered to life, displaying a legal document. I am Chaoji, the majority shareholder and acting CEO of Hugh Group. A collective gasp swept through the room. Jiao Ye's face drained of all color, her expression shattering from triumph to abject panic. And as my first act, Chaoji continued, her gaze finally locking onto her sister. I'm exposing a pest. The screen changed, now displaying encrypted ledgers, offshore account numbers, and damning email chains. Evidence of bribery, embezzlement, years of corruption, has hollowed out the Jiao Group from the inside. The media frenzy was instantaneous. Reporters surged forward, shouting questions as cameras captured Jiao Ye's utter humiliation. Her corporate takeover, her entire world, was unraveling in a storm of flashing lights. Chaoji stepped close to her sister, her voice a venomous whisper meant only for her. You wanted to see my children suffer. You wanted to burn them alive. Her eyes were devoid of all mercy. This is just a taste of the agony they felt. This is only the beginning of your punishment. The polished glass and steel of the B Group headquarters scraped the sky, a monument to corporate power. At its base, amidst the relentless flow of tailored suits and ambitious energy, sat an anomaly. A small, colorful booth manned by two children. A professionally printed banner fluttered above them, seeking handsome, wealthy and kind dad for world's best mom. Xiaomu, dressed in a miniature suit, looked serious and discerning. His twin sister, Zinuo, in a pristine white dress, offered hopeful smiles to passers-by. Their operation was disrupted by a sneering junior executive, his face a mask of disdain. Whose brats are these? Scram. This isn't a playground for the fatherless. The word fatherless hung in the air, sharp and ugly. Zinuo's lip trembled, but Shamu's eyes went cold. Before the man could utter another word, the boy moved with the fluid grace of a master. A quick, precise tap to a pressure point in the man's wrist sent a jolt of numbing pain up his arm. As he yelped and stumbled back, Zinuo completed the maneuver, a perfectly executed Tai Chi push that sent him sprawling onto the manicured lawn, utterly humiliated. We may not have a father, Shamu stated, his voice clear and steady, but we have excellent tutors. A warm chuckle cut through the forming crowd. An elderly man, distinguished and leaning on an ornate cane, stepped forward, his eyes twinkling with amusement. It was Bo's grandfather. He'd seen the whole thing from his car. Such spirit, he murmured, his gaze softening as he recognized the children from the engagement party fiasco. You two have more fire than my entire board of directors, he coughed. A dry, rattling sound that shook his frame. Xiaomu's brow furrowed. Grandpa, your cough is weak, and your complexion is sallow. It suggests a qi deficiency in your lungs. The diagnosis was delivered with the confidence of a seasoned physician. You need astragalus root and lily bulb soup, simmered for 3 hours. The old man stared, utterly captivated. This wasn't just spirit, it was genius. Astounding, he breathed, his heart swelling with a fierce, protective affection. He knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his bones, that these were his great-grandchildren. Seizing the opportunity, Zinuo produced a laminated card from a pink satchel. It had a photo of a stunningly beautiful Chaoji and a time and place. Dad, candidate evaluation, she announced formally. Please deliver this to your grandson. He fits the handsome and wealthy criteria. We will assess his kindness tomorrow. Grandpa Bo took the card as if it were a royal decree. A wide, triumphant grin spread across his face. He had found them. Now, he would bind them to his family forever. The next morning, Chaoji sat stiffly in a chic downtown cafe, storm of irritation brewing behind her serene expression. She had been blackmailed into this evaluation by her own children, who had hidden her company's master key until she agreed. Across from her, a man dripping with designer logos and self-importance gestured condescendingly. So, Ms. Zhou, he said, mispronouncing her name, I've reviewed your portfolio. Impressive. I'm willing to overlook the baggage. He waved a dismissive hand, but my terms are firm. Upon marriage, 50% of your assets will be transferred to my name, and I expect two sons within 3 years. My family needs heirs. Chaoji's teacup clicked against its saucer. The sound was unnervingly sharp in the quiet cafe. My children are not baggage, she said, her voice dangerously low. They are my life's greatest assets, and I would rather find them a father who is a bridge-dwelling beggar with a heart of gold than an empty-suited predator with a vault for a soul. Her words, laced with venom and passion, carried across the cafe. From a corner table, where they were meant to be quietly observing, Xiaomu and Zinuo exchanged alarmed glances. Their plan was derailing. They scrambled from their seats and rushed to their mother's side, creating a deliberate scene. Mummy, my tummy hurts, Zinuo cried, clutching her stomach with theatrical flair. Mum, the candidate has failed the character assessment, Xiaomu declared loudly, pulling out a red ink stamp and marking the man's file with a large fail. Just as the chauvinist sputtered in outrage, the cafe door chimed. Grandpa Bo entered, beaming, with a deeply annoyed bow in tow. Grandfather, I told you, I don't have time for your matchmaking games. O was saying, his sentence dying on his lips as his eyes locked on the scene. He sought Chaoji, her face flushed with anger, and then he saw them. The two little faces he hadn't been able to get out of his mind. You too, he snapped, his irritation shifting to a different kind of exasperation. You too, Chaoji said at the exact same moment, her glare fixed on her meddling children. The simultaneous reprimand, a perfect echo of parental authority, silenced the cafe. Bo and Chaoji froze, suddenly aware of the dozens of eyes on them, of the implicit connection they had just publicly declared. A flush crept up Bo's neck. Grandpa Bo simply clapped his hands in delight. Excellent, a perfect match, he boomed, completely ignoring the failed blind date, his gaze fixed lovingly on Xiaomu and Zinuo. I approve of these two. The rest is just details. The iron gates of the Chaoji family villa, her childhood home, were closed to her. Xiaoye stood on the other side, her face a contorted mask of hysterical ownership. For years, she had lived a life stolen from her sister. This is my house, she shrieked, clutching the bars. Mine and Bo's, you have no right to be here. Chaoji stood on the pavement, flanked by 2 imposing security guards. Her expression was placid, her calm a stark contrast to her sister's frenzy. You are mistaken, she said, her voice devoid of emotion. She held up a document. Father's will was quite clear. This villa and all associated properties were left to me, his only legitimate daughter. Lies. It's all lies. Chaoji didn't bother to argue. She simply nodded to her men. Remove her, As the guards moved forward and the terrified Jiao Ye began to scream, the purr of a luxury engine cut through the air. A black Bentley glided to a halt. Bo emerged, his face an impassive mask. He ignored Jiao Ye completely, his eyes finding Chaoji's. "There's no need for that," he said, his voice carrying an undeniable authority. He produced his own set of documents. "I bought the villa an hour ago. The title is being transferred to you as we speak." Jiao Ye stared, her world shattering. Betrayal, swift and absolute, choked her. "Bo, what are you doing? This is our home." He finally turned to look at her, and his eyes were cold, devoid of any lingering affection. "Our engagement," he stated, his tone flat and final, "was terminated the day you lied to me about those children. You have 1 hour to vacate the premises." Defeated, Jiao Ye crumpled to the ground, a single, broken sob escaping her lips. The last foundation of her fabricated life had been ripped out from under her. Chaoji watched him, her expression unreadable, a flicker of confusion warring with her resolve. Why was he doing this? As if reading her mind, Bo's gaze met hers again, a complex current passing between them. "Don't misunderstand," he said, his voice softening just enough for her to hear. "I'm doing this for my children." The air in the Bo Group's main conference room was a blade of chilled, recycled oxygen. Sunlight, sharp and sterile, cut across the expansive mahogany table, illuminating the tense faces of the board members. They stared, mouths agape, at Bo. He stood at the head of the table, his posture as impeccable as his custom-tailored suit. Yet his words had just sent a seismic shock through the foundation of their corporate strategy. "A 3% profit concession," he repeated, his voice calm and level, a stark contrast to the frantic whispers erupting around him. "That is our final offer to the Chaoji Corporation." His assistant, Kai, looked as if he'd swallowed a wasp. 3% was corporate suicide. It was an unprecedented, illogical gift to a competitor they were meant to be acquiring, not appeasing. Chaoji sat opposite Bo, her portrait of unnerving composure. She hadn't flinched. Her expression was a carefully constructed mask of professional neutrality. But behind her eyes, a storm of calculations whirled. This wasn't business. It was a surrender, a public declaration of something she couldn't yet name. Ignoring the rising tide of dissent from his own team, Bo moved with a fluid grace that seemed out of place in the rigid boardroom. He walked to the credenza, picked up the silver coffee pot, and crossed the space between them. The scent of dark roast filled the air as he poured the steaming liquid into her empty cup. The metallic clink of the pot against the porcelain was the only sound in the stunned silence. He didn't stop there. He pulled out her chair slightly, a subtle adjustment, a gesture of deference and care so personal it felt like an intimate whisper in a crowded room. Kai's eyes widened. He had worked for Bo for 8 years and had never seen him pour anyone coffee, let alone his fiercest rival. This wasn't the cold, calculating CEO he knew. This was a man utterly, inexplicably unknown. As if summoned by the sheer dramatic tension, the conference room doors burst open. Jiao Ye stumbled in, her face a ruin of tear-streaked makeup and desperation. The designer dress she wore was rumpled, her hair a chaotic mess. She looked like a ghost haunting the life she'd lost. "Bo," she cried, her voice raw and pleading. Security guards hovered at the door, uncertain. "Bo, please. You can't do this. Everything I did, it was for us." Bo didn't even turn his full attention to her. He gave a curt, almost imperceptible nod to the guards. His voice, when he spoke, was colder than the winter steel of the skyscraper. "Remove her. My business with Miss Jiao is concluded. Permanently." "No," she shrieked as the guards took her arms, her frantic eyes locked on Chaoji's serene face. "You. This is your fault. You witch. He was mine." The doors clicked shut, muffling her final, desperate sobs. The scandal was over. The justice, quiet and absolute, had been served not with a bang, but with a swift, merciless dismissal. The room remained in a state of suspended animation. Bo finally turned his gaze fully to Chaoji, the noise of the room and its occupants fading into insignificance. "My office," he said. Not a request but a statement. "We need to talk." In the silent, sun-drenched expanse of his office, the city sprawling beneath them, the corporate pretense finally fell away. He stood before her, the weight of 6 lost years in the space between them. "My grandfather is not a patient man," Bo began, his voice low and laced with an emotion she'd never heard from him before: vulnerability. "He knows about the children. He wants to meet them. He believes they are his great-grandchildren." Double quotes. He paused, his gaze intense, searching her face for any crack in her armor. "Chaoji, I need to know the truth. The DNA test." For 6 years, Chaoji had operated on logic, revenge, and a fierce, unyielding need to protect her children. Her heart had been a fortress, its gates sealed against the memory of the man who had abandoned her. But the man standing before her now was not the one from her memories. She had watched him publicly dismantle his own strategic advantage for her. She had seen him offer small, unconscious acts of service. She had just witnessed him sever his ties to Jiaoye with a finality that spoke of unwavering loyalty not to the past, but to the present to her. A tiny, fragile flicker of hope, an emotion she had long considered a liability, sparked within her. The walls of her fortress didn't crumble, they simply dissolved. "My apartment," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her soul. "Tomorrow, 10 a.m. the results will be there." The next morning, the air in her home was thick with unspoken possibilities. The scent of coffee and the faint, sweet smell of children's shampoo hung in the air. Little Ren was meticulously building a skyscraper of magnetic tiles on the living room rug, while his twin sister, Mei, was coloring, her tongue stuck out in concentration. Poe sat on the sofa, a manila envelope resting on the cushion beside him. He looked from the children to the envelope, his hands clenched on his knees. He hadn't touched his coffee. Chaoji watched him from the armchair, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. This was it. The final piece. The truth that would either bind them together or shatter this fragile truce forever. With a deep, shaky breath, Poe picked up the envelope. His fingers, usually so steady signing billion-dollar contracts, trembled as he tore the seal. The sound was deafening in the quiet room. He pulled out the single sheet of paper, his eyes scanning the clinical black text. Chaoji watched his face. She saw the moment his breath caught in his throat. She saw his eyes widen, then squeeze shut as if against a blinding light. His entire body went rigid, a statue carved from disbelief and overwhelming revelation. When he opened his eyes again, they were glistening. He didn't look at her. His gaze went straight to the children playing on the floor, oblivious to the life-altering document in their father's hands. He watched Ren, who frowned with intense focus, the exact same way Bo did when analyzing a market report. He watched Mei toss her head back as she laughed at her brother's tower toppling over, a gesture an identical echo of his own mother's. It was one thing to see the words 99.99% probability of paternity. It was another to see his own blood, his own legacy, so vibrantly alive in these two small, perfect beings. A wave of emotion so powerful it threatened to drown him washed over him, not just responsibility, but a fierce, primal, all-consuming love. 6 years of a life he never knew he had, of laughter he'd never heard, of tiny hands he'd never held, crashed down on him. This wasn't a discovery. It was a homecoming. As he stared, his guard completely gone, his heart laid bare in his expression, Chaoji felt the last of her own defenses turn to dust. She wasn't looking at a CEO or a business partner. She was looking at a father beholding his children for the first time. The genuine, unconditional love pouring from him was the truth she had needed more than any lab report. Sensing the shift in the room's atmosphere, the children stopped their playing. They looked up at the tall, quiet man on the sofa, who was looking at them as if they were the only two people in the world. MEI, always the bolder of the two, stood up and walked hesitantly toward him. "Are you sad?" she asked, her small voice cutting through the silence. Bo shook his head, a single tear tracing a path down his cheek. He knelt on the floor, bringing himself to her level. "No," he whispered, his voice thick with unshed emotion. "I'm happy." Ren followed his sister, his curiosity overcoming his shyness. He looked from Bo's wet cheek to his mother's soft smile. An instinct, deep and innate, clicked into place. He stepped forward and wrapped his small arms around Bo's neck. MEI immediately joined in, burying her face in his other shoulder. "Daddy," Ren murmured into his suit jacket, a word a key turning in the lock of Bo's heart. Bo's arms came around them, holding them tight, sheltering them against his chest. He closed his eyes, breathing in the scent of his children, a profound sense of completeness settling over him. All the corporate battles, the betrayals, the years of loneliness, it all faded into nothing. This was real. This was his family. He looked up over their heads, his gaze finding Chaoji's. The question, the promise, and the apology were all there in his tear-filled eyes. She gave him a slow, watery smile, the first truly unguarded smile she had given him since they were young and full of dreams. "I'm not letting you go," Bo said, his voice a quiet, unbreakable vow meant only for her. "Not them. Not you. Not ever again." In the warm morning light, surrounded by the quiet joy of their children, the past was finally laid to rest. Their future, a story they would now write together, had just begun.